Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here to speak to you about Mt. Gox and answer the question that's on every creditor's mind: what the hell is taking so long? It's been 3.5 years since Mt. Gox filed for bankruptcy. No one has been paid back. No one has any idea when they're going to be paid back. And creditors are mad as hell, and they're not going to take it anymore. So the interesting thing about this bankruptcy is that Mt. Gox is technically solvent as of today. The Mt. Gox exchange has 202,185 bitcoins that they had when they went bankrupt. They still have them, and in fact, they now also have 202,185 bitcoin cash. So as of September 18th, and prices are up since then a little bit, the total value of this was about $870 million. The total value of claims from victims, people who had funds at Mt. Gox, Bitcoin or fiat, when the exchange went bankrupt, those have been valued at about $520 million. And we'll get into how exactly they were valued just a little bit. But that leaves about $350 million left over that is not going to go to the people who actually lost money, but is going to go to other creditors who didn't lose money, who didn't have money at Mt. Gox. CoinLab has a claim for $75 million, and another $100 million claim at Mt. Gox's parent company. We're going to talk more about this. And anything else will go to shareholders, being Mark Rapellis, Jed McCaleb, the guys who were the shareholders of Mt. Gox, and any of their personal creditors. So Mt. Gox also had another $20 million in cash, and that's going to be a wash. That's going to go to the trustee and pay his legal fees and pay other professional fees. So how are these claims being valued? Well, the trustee basically just took the price of Bitcoin on the date Mt. Gox filed for bankruptcy and assigned it that price, which was 483 US dollars. So if you have one Bitcoin at Mt. Gox, all you're getting back is 483 US dollars, right? That doesn't seem fair intuitively, right? Because Bitcoin is now almost $4,000, and if you were someone with Bitcoin, right, you're only getting like 10% of that. So it's even more of an issue because the trustee wanted to sell these Bitcoins right away, right? Mt. Gox went into bankruptcy. He's got these Bitcoins. What the heck are Bitcoins? I want trusty old Japanese yen. And he was ready to just liquidate it. But creditors didn't want this. They didn't want to see the price of Bitcoin tank from him putting that big order on the market right after this bankruptcy in 2014. And at all the creditor meetings, they demanded that we be repaid in Bitcoin. And so the trustee, to our astonishment, said, well, I'll look into it. We'll see what we can do. So because of these creditors, the trustee never sold these Bitcoins. So now the price is sky high, and these creditors, who, the hodlers, the ones who are responsible for Mt. Gox holding on to all these Bitcoins, are not going to be rewarded at all. It's going to be the fiat creditors and anyone else. So in my estimation, people who held fiat should get 100% back. Remainder should go to people who were Bitcoin creditors, who were the majority of the creditors. So why weren't creditors just paid out in 2015 and 2016? Well, the simple answer is the trustee had to investigate claims, and this took a little bit of time. But the more in-depth answer is there's one claim that was rejected that will not go away, and that is a claim by CoinLab. So CoinLab, their CEO is Peter Vicenis. He is the former chairman of the Bitcoin Foundation, and he's basically arguing that Mt. Gox victims have to pay for his business deal. His company didn't have money at Mt. Gox. He's arguing that, on the basis of a lawsuit, that Mt. Gox owes him money. And so it's based really, in my estimation, and the trustee's estimation, on a weak lawsuit, but that because of nuances in the international litigation and slowness of the courts, won't be resolved for a very long time. So what is this claim based on exactly? So on May 2nd, 2013, CoinLab sued Mt. Gox for breach of contract in U.S. federal court. And this was based on a contract they'd entered into months before, in November 2012, where CoinLab was going to be Mt. Gox's exclusive agent in the U.S. market. They were going to receive 90% of the profit from all new customers in the U.S. market and 40% of all existing profit. A real sweetheart deal. Now, why would Mt. Gox give them such a deal? They did this because the regulatory market and regulatory climate in the U.S. was very difficult. 50 different states, 50 different sets of regulation. No one had exactly figured out how to tackle it. There was uncertainty in this. So Mt. Gox figured, hey, let someone else do it. We'll focus on our core business. So in the agreement, there was a clause that required CoinLab to be in compliance with all rules and regulations, right? They didn't want to let CoinLab be the exclusive agent when it was uncertain if they could actually perform. And there was a transition period. You can read the clause here. The transition period was 3 months. So after this 3-month period, CoinLab had to be in compliance with all applicable laws. In short, CoinLab never got money transmitter licenses. Mt. Gox never gave them any of the customer details, ended up in a lawsuit. CoinLab asked for $75 million. $50 million was a liquidated damages clause under the contract, another $25 million just alleging actual damages. So Mt. Gox went into bankruptcy, and the case was unresolved, and it's now a claim. So 2 questions now. One, we have to figure out whether CoinLab was in breach or Mt. Gox was in breach. And if so, right, if CoinLab does deserve money, how much? What are damages? So was CoinLab in breach? Well, there's no dispute that you need a money transmitter license to operate a Bitcoin exchange in the US. No one disputes this. CoinLab's argument is that it wasn't clear during the transition period that you needed this license, which is just not true. The transition period ended on March 22nd, 2013, and 5 days before then, FinCEN issued a directive clarifying that you need a money transmitter license to operate a Bitcoin exchange in the US. So within the transition period, it was crystal clear you needed this license. CoinLab argues that, well, this was unexpected. It was unforeseen. We shouldn't be punished by it. And actually, it wasn't unforeseen because you had precedent, right? In the case of US versus eGold Limited, eGold was an early-stage internet company where they held gold on account, and you could trade in and out of gold and send payments. And they were prosecuted for not having a money transmitter license, and it didn't end very well for them. So it was already known that you very likely were going to have these licenses. So the case now is in assessment in Japan, and it's Japanese lawyers trying to figure out how to resolve this, and it very likely will get kicked back to the US, where it'll be litigated in court there for God knows how long to figure out what the answer is. So let's assume for a moment that CoinLab is actually entitled to something because Mt. Gox breached. Well, what do they deserve? What are the actual damages here? You can see this chart. This was put together by a gentleman named Kim Nilsson from WizSec. Kim is in Tokyo, and he has studied the Mt. Gox hack like no one else. He has put together this chart, which through data reconstruction shows Mt. Gox's actual balance over time as compared to what their expected balance of Bitcoin would be. Many people don't know this, but the hack was something that occurred over time. It wasn't something that happened all at once, even though Mt. Gox just discovered they were hacked all at once. So when CoinLab entered into this deal with Mt. Gox in November 2012, Mt. Gox only had about half the Bitcoins they should have had. And when they sued, Mt. Gox had about 20% of the Bitcoin that you would have expected them to have. So if the deal had actually gone through, CoinLab very likely would have ended up owing its customers all types of money that was stuck in Mt. Gox, and it would have been a bankruptcy within a bankruptcy, very likely. So what about liquidated damages? Well, the contract provided that CoinLab would be entitled to $50 million if Mt. Gox breached. So parties are generally allowed to do this and agree what will happen if there's a breach. But the law says that these damages, liquidated damages clauses, have to be calculated to approximate actual damages, and it has to be a situation where damages are hard to quantify. So here, yeah, I think damages are hard to quantify, but were they calculated to approximate actual damages? Well, we have deposition testimony from the Mt. Gox CoinLab litigation that shows that one of the primary reasons that $50 million was selected was to make it difficult for Mt. Gox to back out of the agreement. They wanted this penalty to be sufficiently high so Mt. Gox couldn't just breach, and CoinLab could be assured they would continue on doing this forever because Mt. Gox would have to pay this penalty. Well, now it's creditors paying this penalty, and it wasn't calculated to approximate actual damages. It was approximated to be a punishment. So there's also the matter of 5.2 million USD that CoinLab owed Mt. Gox. During the transition period, CoinLab began onboarding customers, and they took about $5.2 million worth of customer money. CoinLab was asked for this money to give it over to Mt. Gox. They didn't do it. The trustee asked for it after bankruptcy. They didn't do it. They filed this claim. And the fact is that CoinLab just no longer has this money. We have leaked documents. They've been displayed at the website, goxdocs2.org, and they're available elsewhere as well. And Mt. Gox's lawyers got their hands on all types of records from CoinLab in discovery, and they concluded that CoinLab spent the money. There's an email in those documents where CoinLab's CFO resigned, citing movement of the Mt. Gox funds as a reason for her resigning as a chief financial officer. And Mt. Gox's lawyers concluded that Peter Vicenis very likely violated state and federal law by misusing those funds. They concluded at the time in a legal memo that it would be very unlikely for a prosecutor to prosecute because all they'd be doing would be defending a Bitcoin exchange in Japan that a lot of people on the Silk Road were using. So maybe their minds will change now that they're defending U.S. Persons who are creditors in the Mt. Gox bankruptcy. So what is Peter doing now? He's managing director of New Alchemy, CTO at Token Card, and he runs a blog offering himself for speaking engagements. So I would consider how he's treating his former constituents as president of the Bitcoin Foundation before you decide to engage with his company. So moving forward, there's going to be a lot more developments in the Mt. Gox bankruptcy. There's a lot of money to be fought over. Things are still a long way from being resolved. The trustee is considering settling this case, but a lot of creditors would be very disappointed if this case were settled. So I think the fairest thing, and I think most creditors would agree, would be to settle with Peter. He can keep the $5.2 million, and the rest of the claim can drop, and people can get paid back, and then you can continue to hold your Bitcoin and make money as Bitcoin continues to appreciate. Thank you very much.